Welcome to the IRS Solution Attorney Show. If you have problems with the IRS, don't focus on the negative, focus on the solutions. With the IRS Solution Attorney, Darrin T. Mish. For over 15 years, he's been helping taxpayers with IRS problems reclaim their lives and their financial stability. Now, here's your host of the IRS Solution Attorney Show, Darrin T. Mish.
Welcome and good morning. This is the IRS Solution Attorney, Darrin T. Mish, joined once again by my lovely and talented co-host who's actually trying to plug my microphone in right now, or my headset at least.
Your microphone's working fine.
My microphone's
it's the
working
headphones.
and going out live, but my headsets are a little bit suspect at this point. But how you doing, Katrina?
I'm doing good. You sound really good with no sleep, I gotta tell you.
It's artificial enthusiasm here, or at least artificial energy, I think.
All right, so if you say something that's like a little bit off, I'll correct you and make sure that you're going crazy here.
When do I not say something that's a little bit off?
Well, I got to thank you for this delicious bagel.
You're welcome, Pat. I really should get a picture of this. It's pretty funny. He has cream cheese smeared all over his face.
It's so good.
He looks like a 2-year-old eating a bagel. Really.
If you don't wear it, you don't enjoy it.
Oh gosh, it's gonna be all over your head and everything else.
He's got the little flavor saver thing going on, on the upper lip.
Let's not go there, Darrin. So you're listening to the IRS Solution Attorney Show. So we'll promise to keep it fun, to keep it real. We'll give you some valuable information. Also, we won't make it so serious all the time. If you have a question like tax related or specifically IRS issue related, you can call us. We are live in the studio, 888-404-1010. Again, 888-404-1010. So the show that we have lined up for you today are 9 common tax mistakes to steer clear of, which that's right on time for tax season.
Exactly. That's why we thought we'd do the show today. It's a good topic. There's 9 things, or there's actually probably 99 things that you should steer clear of at tax season and tax mistakes. But we're going to talk about 9 of them today.
And keep in mind that some of these things ultimately lead to the bigger issue, which is people that are like, oops, gosh, I didn't file my tax return. Or, all of a sudden I have this letter from the IRS that wants to seize or levy or all that fun stuff they do.
Yeah, for sure. If we had a 3-hour show or a 4-hour show, I could tell a story about every single one of these 9 mistakes. I probably could tell more than one story about all of these mistakes. But the first one...
I think you should add a story in. You can pick 1 through 9, the best story.
All right, I'll pick a story. But the first one is pretty common, but you wouldn't think it was. It's just failing to or forgetting to sign and date the return. It's like, duh. But
what?
I've actually done it.
They give you a hard time if you don't date it or sign it?
Well, if it's not signed or dated, it gets sent back. So
why?
It's not considered an executed return. It's not an official return. And so you would pay late penalties and et cetera if you actually forgot to sign and date the return.
Okay, my jaw is open now. That's ridiculous.
Nowadays, when so many people, probably the majority are filing electronically, there's still, a form that you're supposed to sign with your tax preparer. And if your tax preparer sends out your tax return without getting you to sign that form, then he's not supposed to transmit it to the IRS, although I see it get done all the time. But yeah, failing to sign a date of return is a pretty common problem. It's just one of those things. I think that emotionally people are like so glad to have the return, all the numbers crunched and all
the hard part's done.
They think it's all done and they forget to sign it.
So are they accepting electronic signatures now? Because I know you can e-file it, but can you e-sign it? Does that count?
The signature form with the e-filer gets kept at the tax preparer's office. So that's something that...
But I mean, you can't electronically sign, like DocuSign your tax return. Can you do that?
No, you see, the government's really always pretty far behind, private enterprise. And even though when you buy or sell a house, you can e-sign and do all those kinds of things.
DocuSign everything.
Yeah, and courts allow you to e-sign. Even federal courts, surprisingly, you can e-sign, but not the IRS. The IRS's idea of highfalutin technology is a fax machine. So
okay.
The irony, I think, in that is that they actually use e-fax. So how does an e-fax end up at, their desk? Well, it goes through the internet, of course. So I'm not sure how, an e-fax is more secure than an email, but they don't use email, at least with the public. They use interagency
it's
email.
faxed, but it's still emailed.
Right. Yeah, exactly. All it is, it's a picture, right, that got transmitted by a fax machine, potentially on one end. But
at least they have digital stuff, right? I mean, we're getting better.
Yeah, we are getting better. I bet you they still have 286 processor computers over there, though.
The The ones that are scrapped for all the gold parts.
Well, they have another problem. They have a tendency to lose laptops and things too. So I'm sure there's, when a revenue officer or a revenue agent loses a laptop, I'm sure there's no, confidential taxpayer information on one of those.
Not at all.
But anyway, moving right along, the goal of the show is not to bash the IRS. It's just
I just like to tease them a little.
Yeah, it's just to figure out what the solutions are to people's, common tax problems. So the next one is checking the wrong filing status. And I see this all the time.
What does that mean? Like what?
Like single, married filing jointly, married filing separately, head of household, qualifying widower, those kinds of things. And I see this all the time in this context. You'll have a husband and wife and some kids, and maybe the husband's not working and the wife is. And so she'll go ahead and file head of household because most people think, or a lot of people think, that head of household means, well, who wears the pants in the family?
That's what I thought. So what does it mean from a tax return perspective?
So Katrina's all about
I am the head of household.
I check that box every time.
It would be a mess if I filed my own return, so I have no idea what I check. Probably just married, I guess. I don't know.
No, head of household means a single parent raising kids, essentially. I mean, there's some other, technical jargon that goes in there, but that's basically the scenario. And you see it all the time where you have a married couple and one of them claims the kids. Now, if they're not married.
What does that do? Like, just say, hypothetically speaking, they are married. One of them's not working. The other one files head of household. Like, what does that do?
Well, you get a break. You get a tax break on if you file head of household because it's designed to relieve some of the tax burden that a single parent has in raising a dependent child. And so if they check that wrong box, then they're subject to an audit and then, to a recharacterization of the filing status. And so it could cost you, several $1,000s.
Because they tack on like those late penalties or...
Yeah, there's going to be, probably a negligence or an accuracy penalty. So it could be up to 25%. But it's not one of these big, hairy, scary audits. Like I had scheduled at 11 a.m. this morning and had to reschedule. Not one of those. It's really what we call a correspondence audit, where the IRS simply sends a letter and tells you, hey, you messed this up.
So they can just fix it, like amend it, or is it a correction?
Yeah, if you have checked the wrong filing status and you have not gotten that audit letter from the IRS, you can certainly amend it and fix that mistake.
All right, so number 3 on our list is messing up Social Security numbers. Because that's kind of like I'm typing it and my finger misses the 9 and hits the 6.
Yeah, I wish this wasn't as common as it is. It happens quite a bit in our office because some people actually write their Social Security number wrong when they come into the office. Like they'll transpose a number. I've even had some people come in and say, I'm not sure what my Social Security number is, which is pretty interesting. The person's, 50, 60 years old.
What?
And they're not sure what their number is. One guy that comes to mind was a gentleman that was in, he entered the service. He was drafted back during the Vietnam era. And he knew what his Social Security number was, but the Army transposed a number and then declared that was his serial number, his Social Security number for forevermore. And so we did eventually get it fixed, but it was a gigantic snafu. And it took, he had been on and off on this wrong number for like 30 or 40 years. So that was a problem that actually kind of crossed agency boundaries.
That reminds me of my grandfather, he told me how, when he was younger, he gave them a different date of birth, like a couple years older when he went to the DMV. And they never verified anything back then because he was born in 32. And so he always had the wrong date of birth on his driver's license.
Yeah, so it was great at ages, 21 and 65, probably.
Well, 18 was the drinking age back then, 18, remember?
Not too bad. Yeah.
So, but the social thing, I could understand where sometimes that would get mixed up. Because, even mine and my husband's, the 2 digits in the middle are only 1 digit off for us. Yeah. They're very close. So I've done it personally.
Yeah, and if you have a spouse who's trying to give, the tax preparer, the other spouse's Social Security number, I barely know mine. I do, in fact, know mine. But my wife's, I have to look it up every time. We've been married 20 years.
What? You should know that.
Well, it's a crutch. I know where to find it, so I just don't commit it to memory. It helps keep me from buying stuff in her name and committing identity theft.
I'm sure Heather will be very happy that you're not going to the men's clothing store buying stuff in her name.
Not sure why the men's clothing store would need your social, but that's kind of a side issue. The Social Security number was intended not to be a national identifying number. It was intended to be solely for uses of the Social Security Administration. Do you remember when you got your
Are we boring you, Pat? Did you have to just bring that music in real high just to make sure?
No, I'm really getting into this, and I'm mad because it started.
Well, when we come back, I'll get back to why the Social Security number wasn't supposed to be used, for everything like it is now.
You're listening to the IRS Solution Attorney Show. We are live in studio, 888-404-1010. We are talking about the 9 common mistakes to steer clear of, and we're going to continue on that path. We will take your calls in between, 888-404-1010. We'll be back in a minute.
Are you suffering from IRS problems? Do you owe back taxes you can't pay? Is your paycheck or bank account being levied? Or maybe you haven't filed tax returns in years and simply don't know what to do. This is Darrin Mish to tell you that if you're tired of IRS problems hanging over your head and are ready for a fresh start, we may be able to help. Call the law offices of Darrin Mish at 888-GET-MISH, 888-GET-MISH. I can help you file old tax returns, work to release tax liens or stop wage levies, even negotiate deals to pay off back taxes at a discount, sometimes for pennies on the dollar. Hey, let's face it, these days it's not hard to get into tax trouble. A divorce, failed business, health problems, you name it. The point is, IRS problems may be solved if you're willing to take the first step. Call for a free consultation at 888-GET-MISH. That's 888-438-6474. Or go to the web at getirshelp.com, because the one sure thing is, IRS problems don't solve themselves. So get Mish. 888-438-6474. Principal Office, Tampa.
Welcome back to the IRS Solution Attorney Show. I'm your host, the IRS Solution Attorney, Darrin Mish.
And I'm your co-host, Katrina Maidwell. Thanks for sticking with us. We are live in the studio today, 888-404-1010. If you're just joining us, the whole show is all about 9 common mistakes to steer clear of, to help you with those little tax follies, to keep you out of trouble with the IRS, and to keep you from paying fees and penalties.
So you don't need IRS solutions if you just
think
avoid
of
these mistakes.
100
right?
other ways to spend money other than to pay a penalty or interest to the IRS.
You were talking before the break about not knowing your wife's Social Security number. I don't even know my wife's middle name.
Oh, my goodness.
I don't know her previous address. I haven't met her parents yet. And I've been married to her for 20. She said, if you last 40 years, I'll start giving you a little more information.
Where is she from anyway?
I don't know.
Mail away bride? Pat did a mail away bride. That's what it is.
We need to call her, get her on there, and ask her what her middle name is.
Another thing about, I have a friend, and she goes, I have a guy that I've been seeing, and I'm all mad at him, and I just should call somebody because he's never filed his taxes, ever.
Oh, my goodness. Well, this is actually pretty darn common. It tends to be the guy is sort of he's out there probably doing a blue collar job, but a lot of white collar jobs too. And they're more busy, worrying about the cash flow and how to get the bills paid and not really that worried about getting the tax filings. That's sort of a detail thing to a lot of business owners, a detail thing that might be beneath them or might even be, administrative in nature in their mind. In fact, I was talking to a gentleman yesterday, hasn't filed a return in a while, like
a long while,
like 8 years. And, so what we're going to do in that case is his wife is fully aware, though. I have proof of this because, at least somebody was on the other end of the phone that seemed to know what was going on, that was, proclaimed to be his spouse. But in that case, what we're going to do is we're going to file her married filing separately. And he, and both of them married filing separately, obviously. But that's because he's going to have the entire tax debt and she's not going to have, significant tax debt. And if she does have some tax debt, then they're going to pay that off. And the reason that we're going to do this is we don't want to suck her into his, tax vortex of hell because he's going to owe, a solid, 6 figures. And they have a really big house on a lake and they have a lot of equity in that house. And it's owned by tenancy by the entirety. So that's an undivided half interest that each spouse has. And if we were to file jointly, then the tax liens that are, obviously forthcoming at some point soon, would attach to the entire property. Well, if we file separately and she has no tax debt, it still attaches to the property, but it only attaches to his undivided half interest in the property. So in many ways, we will have saved, at least half of the equity in that property from being exposed and subject to that tax lien. If it were ever seized and sold itself.
There's another mistake that I heard someone talk about. They said, well, we always file separately, my wife and I. But then when you take the deductions, they take the deductions of being married.
Yeah, there's a lot of rules that apply to, married filing separate status. Most people would benefit from filing jointly because there's a tax break, associated with that. And so if you file separately, you're going to pay a little bit of extra tax. And the reason that you're paying that extra tax is to get the benefit of being, separated. Now, this is something I always forget to say. And since, this is obviously a local show going to Florida primarily, but in community property states, which are the states out west, like California and, Arizona and New Mexico and Texas, the ones that have the Mexican Spanish sort of heritage, in community property states, then the spouse is subject to all of the liabilities of the other spouse. And so this filing status doesn't make as much, difference. The funny thing is I went to law school, grew up in California. I went to law school in California and had to I took a whole course on community property. But after being here in Florida for, 23 years, you kind of forget unless and until you talk to somebody, out in Texas or whatever. And they're saying, well, I'm telling them what the deal is, and then they go, well, what about community property? I'm like,
and Texas has weird stuff anyway. Like, I remember, because I started on the loan side versus real estate, and we used to do loans in Texas, and they had all these weird little funky rules about financing the property, and, like, both spouses have to be on it. It's weird.
Yeah, and in those states with the Spanish heritage, they also have common law marriage, which basically means, if two people nowadays, if two people romantically shack up for long enough,
romantically,
I think in most states, I think it's only 5 years, which, in today's day and age, living with somebody for 5 years is not really that long.
No.
Right. So in those states, they're actually technically married. So then, it brings in all kinds of interesting, thoughts about, well, which filing status do we pick if we're technically common law married? And the community property gets in there.
That's a good question. That's where it gets real weird state specific.
Yeah, it gets all twisted up and all that. But in Florida, we don't have common law marriage, which I think is a good thing, even though Florida has a lot of that, Spanish heritage. But, the Spain didn't have control over Florida for all that long, as opposed to out west where, they were under at least Mexican rule until 1848, which is really not that long ago if you think about it.
No. Not in the big scheme of things
not
compared
in
to Europe.
Not in the scheme of law.
Right.
I remember going to law school, and one of the things that you do is you learn by the Socratic method, but you have to read a tremendous number of cases out of a law book. And,
which means?
Well, you have to read. The way we learn is we read case opinions about how the majority in that case ruled on that, on that case, and then it's supposed to teach us, the rule of law with regard to that particular application. So, for example, if there was a contract dispute, you read a case about how a contract dispute was ultimately resolved. And a lot of those cases were, 1700s or early 1800s, a lot of pre-slavery cases and things like that. So,
All right. So number 4 is failing to report income.
Well, gee.
Yeah, you never see that one.
Yeah, this is probably the most common one that's almost guaranteed to get you in trouble. Remember, folks, that when you work at a job, you get a W-2, obviously, right? Well, but when you're an independent contractor, the payor of that job is supposed to issue you a 1099 if you make over $600. Well, $600 is just not that much money. So what I see a lot is people, they forget to put all of their 1099 income on a tax return. So let's think of it hypothetical here. If you had 1099s that amounted to $100,000 in income in a year, and you fill out your Schedule C and you only report $50,000 worth of income, what do you think happens?
They're going to be probably triggering an audit, I would imagine.
Yeah, it's a guaranteed and almost instantaneous audit because although we were making fun or poking fun at the IRS's technology just, in the last segment.
You probably wouldn't miss $50,000.
They do actually have pretty good ability to match the 1099s to the gross income report on a return.
How do freelancers play into that? Because there's so many, corporations now and places online that you can hire freelancers and that companies work with freelancers, because I do myself, but then I'm paying basically company to company. I have no idea what they do. Do they send the people 1099s? And some of those people aren't even in the United States. So are they subject to those same laws?
So I'm not sure if this is the real website name, but let's call it freelancer.com. So you as a U.S. citizen hires another U.S. citizen through freelancer.com to do some job that's worth more than $600 and you pay freelancer.com, $601, then they're going to go ahead and issue that 1099 to that U.S. citizen, on your behalf. It's because it's really on their behalf.
Freelance.com would issue that.
You were the customer of freelancer.com,
right?
And freelancer was the one that paid, the freelancer on the other end.
Right.
Now, if that freelance independent contractor is in the Philippines or Mexico or wherever,
somewhere else,
then they're not subject to that law and no 1099s are issued. And they're supposed to, I'm sure this is really common, right? They're supposed to pay the taxes in their home jurisdiction, whatever that means. Now,
in some of those super corrupt places, I'm sure that happens.
Yeah, I'm sure in the Philippines and some of those places that are, really third world and not really knocking them, but they just don't have the taxing, they don't have the efficiency that the IRS has. And
the taxing authority really is not there, I would imagine. It's not.
It's just, I think it comes down to resources on the government's end in those countries, and they just don't have the resources to track down every bit of income like we do here. A lot of those countries have really, deep underground economies too.
Right.
So
the internet, like from a global perspective, has probably changed a lot of things.
Oh, for sure.
As far as money and how stuff changes hands.
I know that in the Philippines that it's very common for young people to work. They get out of their university, which is more analogous to our high school system, and they learn how to do some online things, some data processing, maybe some programming, some internet marketing stuff, and they go ahead and they hang their shingle on Elance or freelancer.com or Guru or these other places, and they get paid, and they get paid, higher than average market wages over there.
Right. Just because their country's, dollar stretches a little further.
Yeah, I know the Philippine peso is very weak, and in the U.S. dollar really goes a long way. The average person in the Philippines makes right around $200 a month.
Wow, I can't even imagine how much that is per hour, but anyway.
Not much.
You're listening to the IRS Solution Attorney Show. We're talking about 9 common mistakes to steer clear of, to keep you out of trouble with the IRS, and to keep you from having to go to Mr. Darrin Mish's office. But if you found yourself in the hot seat and you have an issue with the IRS or you've got a question, we will help you. You can call us at 888-404-1010, 888-404-1010, or even, somebody have them give us a call. We'll be happy to answer it. And, you can be Sally and Joe Smith. It's cool. All right, we'll be back in a minute.
10 years ago today, I still that midnight rider, flying through the night, it seemed like a rocket fuel gunpowder, and he was flying, rage just as fast as an eagle.
All right, so what do you think about the music, Darrin?
I think it's cool. I'm a country music enthusiast. I say thumbs up.
All right, we'll like that. Midlife crisis?
Absolutely not. That's just a man making art.
That's what happens when your co-host is a male.
Or I think it's actually a bunch of men making art, isn't it? It's not one guy.
No.
You can't make all that.
There's
beautiful,
one chick in the mix.
You can't make all that beautiful noise without, other people. It's not a one-man band.
No, not at all. Not at all. So you're listening to the IRS Solution Attorney Show, 9 common mistakes to steer clear of. And where did we leave off? I think using the wrong IRS form.
No,
number
we
5?
were actually talking about failing to report income, but we were pretty much done with that. Put all your 1099s and your W-2s, put all your income on there. There's one other point I wanted to make, come to think of it, about that, and that is that if you don't get 1099s, let's say you're in a cash business, you have
like a restaurant or something like that.
Or my favorite short story is the liquor store, right? The liquor store that only reported the income on the 1099Ks from the credit card machines. So what that tax return said inadvertently was the position was all the money that we took into this establishment over the course of a year was in credit and debit card sales. Period.
Only.
No cash.
For alcohol.
No cash whatsoever. So
silly dodo bird should have reported at least a little bit of cash. You might have got away with something.
And so the other funny thing that happened in that case was during the course of the audit, the IRS went ahead and summons the liquor sales receipts, and those were all paid in cash.
Oh, snap.
So, yeah, it was a little bit hard to explain.
You probably can't say he drank that much alcohol, right?
I don't think this particular gentleman drank alcohol at all. So
Gotta love it.
He was of a particular religious persuasion that doesn't allow that. So it was an interesting case, but
so
we
you
got it worked
represent
out.
people that have audits as well, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Not my absolute favorite thing to do, because
But you'll do it.
and I do it. And
for the right person, if you're nice.
that they're not super fun. It is, to be quite honest, what happens in most audits is there's a red flag like I just described. And so there is going to be a change. There is going to be some money owed.
Something's going to happen.
Yeah, there's going to be some penalties and interest. It's not going to be a no change audit in most instances. So as long as you have a client that sort of admits that there's some culpability, some responsibility, and they get the fact that there's going to be some changes, and my job is to minimize those and just make things as good as I can.
Easy, fast, painless.
Then those audits are fine. It's the audits that are really hard are the people that just don't want to take any responsibility and just don't want to acknowledge that there could possibly be any change happen in the audit. And there are innocent people.
Like the tax protesters.
Yeah, there are innocent people who do get audited, and there are no problems. And I don't mind those cases either, as long as we can, ding, 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 substantiate and document.
Have you seen any clear, flat-out mistakes?
Oh, yeah.
Or like fraud cases where someone's using someone else's social, but they didn't collect the money?
Well, there's rampant identity theft going on right now where people are doing that. They're making up Social Security numbers, or they're using someone else's Social Security number. But I don't get those guys. I don't get the bad guys come in to.
Of course not.
I only get to fix the problems and the damage that they have caused.
We've seen that a lot, actually. We've had customers that, and sometimes it'll pop up late, because now in the state of Florida, we're considered a high risk state. So I'm just saying, it used to be only like Miami-Dade, Broward County. Now it's the whole state of Florida. So if you were to apply for a loan, like getting a mortgage, they're going to verify that your tax returns is the same as you file with the IRS as what you gave the lender. Yeah. And they're really weird, stupid about some things. Like I've seen these things be off $1 or something just ridiculous, where maybe they caught something later, added something back in. And so maybe they had the original copy, but the one they filed had a couple minor changes. And they get super weird about that. Yeah,
that's a real problem. And I think that the entire system, private enterprise and the IRS is trying to grapple with this, identity theft crisis that we've had.
Yeah.
It's happened to me, not in the context of the IRS, but it has happened to me where somebody gained access to my identity information and bought stuff and had it sent to, someplace in the Bronx. And
I had a couple customers that literally someone else filed their return and got the refund.
Yeah, that's
before
really
they had a chance to file.
I would say
hopefully they're working on that, are they?
I'd say like 20 to 30% of all my clients are in that ID theft, kind of hold status with the IRS. And this kind of brings me back to that Social Security number discussion that we were having that we didn't really finish up. And that was that when that program came out, that number was supposed to only be for Social Security use. So only the retirement or disability, benefits use. And then slowly over time, the IRS says, okay, well, this is cool because we can use this number as a number that everybody has that's unique to that person. And then just in the course of my lifetime, which is less than 50 years, that number, the Social Security card that I got when I was 14 or whatever said right on it, this number to, not to be used for any other purpose. But then I got a replacement card, I don't know, sometime later, probably in my 20s, and it no longer said that. And the Social Security number is used in so many different places, even in private industry, that is really probably the singular reason why we have the ID theft crisis that we have. Because those of us who are older than, 20, 30 years old, we used to be really free and liberal with the use of our Social Security number. I can remember giving it to, practically people at the gas station when you, pumped gas. Like, not that's, not a great example, but it was
a lot more loose than it is now.
Yeah. I was almost proud to like stand there and go, I can remember it and here's my number, and now that's a really bad idea. Because if someone has access to your Social Security number, your address, your date of birth.
Well, think about it, really. All they need is your Social Security number. Everything else is already everywhere else. So, like if you're on Facebook or anywhere else, chances are your date of birth is going to be on there or somewhere, anywhere. There's so many places. Address is like, you can find that anywhere. That's the easiest piece to get. Name is right there. So the only little missing piece is the social, and boom, there's your identity theft.
Yeah. This is not the sort, the topic of the show, but I have one of those ID theft monitoring services now, and I won't say the name, but I've had it for many years, and I have to have it now because I need instant alerts when any kind of credit activity is going on my account. Because, probably in one of these Eastern European, Russian kind of, mobs got a hold of my ID, my ID information, and they opened an account with Dell Computers. Bought about $8,000 worth of computers and sent them to some, tenement in the Bronx. And I can remember trying to unravel that. See, I'd never had a relationship with Dell Computers ever. I didn't even own a Dell computer. And I start getting this statement that says I owe them $8,000. And when I was trying to unravel that, I mean, Dell was pretty cool about it. It was almost instantaneous. They're like, okay, this isn't you. Fine. We'll go ahead and write it off. But
You
then,
had to file a police report, right?
yeah, but how do you file a police report in that case? Who do you file with? You know?
Well, that's the problem is they're all saying not my jurisdiction, it's the other one, and they're both pointing fingers at each other.
Yeah, I called Tampa PD because my office was in, and I lived in the city of Tampa at that time. Called TPD. They're like, yeah, really not our problem.
Oops, sorry. Happened in New York. Call them.
You call NYPD, and they're like,
Laughing you off the phone.
They're even less interested. Like, what do you want us to do about it? But then I got kind of frustrated. So I called the Secret Service. Negative. They're not interested. The reason, and Pat just made a funny face, like, why would you call the Secret Service? Well, a lot of people don't know this, but they handle counterfeiting and credit card fraud. So they have two jobs. We think of them as protecting the president, but they are actually the biggest agency that deals with counterfeiting. And do you know that to the best of my knowledge, that no major counterfeiting ring has ever like gotten away with it in the United States, because the Secret Service is like awesome at their
You know
job.
what we do see people getting away with in my industry is rental fraud. So like they will grab pictures off of these online sites that most people are familiar with, starting with a Z or an R. And they will basically take those and they'll post them on Craigslist. That's a big one. And then they'll basically collect rent on behalf of the owner. And they'll say, oh yeah, I'm working out of town. If you Western Union me the money.
At least just the deposit.
I'll have somebody, I need the deposit to hold the property. They'll put it in at some really low rate. So the renter is super attractive and motivated to secure that property. And they're not even the owner. And people don't even think to look it up and see if it matches public records and that kind of stuff. But it happens all the time. And then the same thing, they're somewhere else in another state, properties here, and both of the law enforcement agencies are pointing to each other. So what happens is we end up having to send them to the FBI to file a report there. And you can imagine where that falls on their priority list.
Actually, after the Secret Service, I actually called the FBI in Tampa, and the guy was really cool, talked to me for a really long time. Did not take a report. I mean, it's at the end of the day, there was really no way for me to get any law enforcement agency to be interested in this particular case. Even though,
it's like, got bigger fish to fry.
You know, if you stole an $8,000 car and you reported it to the police, they would do something about it. But $8,000 worth of computers just went poof. Bank, paid it off, and
I think it's the difference in the jurisdiction.
You know, and another crazy thing that's happening out there, a lot of young people, they don't want to carry wallets anymore. So, and I've seen this before. They said, I took a picture of my driver's license. I took a picture of my birth certificate. I got a picture of my credit card. I got a picture of my social security card, all on their phone.
Yeah.
Yeah, you better hope that fingerprint technology is pretty darn good.
But
or
the thing is, every time you download an app, they have, okay, we have the right to go look at your pictures.
Yeah, remember there was
That's
that big
fabulous idea.
There was that big, scandal a year or two ago about all the cloud. Somebody broke into the Apple iCloud and got the compromising photos of all the celebrities who were storing these photos in the cloud. And it's not even something that they intentionally did, because I know that on an iPhone, if you take a photo and if you have iCloud set up, it ends up backing up.
Yeah, it just does it by itself.
It just does it automatically, and it's not something that you have to be consciously aware of.
It's very, very, very sad that you're forced to get these things like LifeLock and things that you have to pay now just to make yourself safe.
Yeah,
it's the world we live in.
It is, but I'd rather pay the $29 a month or whatever than go back through the hours and hours and hours and hours of time trying to unravel that particular mess that I described. Yeah. It really took, and I'm a lawyer, so I kind of had a clue about how to go about fixing it. But I can imagine the average person is just frustrated,
painful,
lost, and not sure what to do.
It's just the whole world has changed. I mean, the social security numbers, the tax, like all this kind of relates. But even with the kids, like the photos, I mean, not to go too far down that rabbit hole, but they'll take pictures of each other, and now they're trying to charge them with child porn. I mean, it's just crazy. This is the world we live in.
Snapchat,
like all these things
like
are different than they were when we grew up.
Yeah. I'm glad that there weren't, I'm glad that not everybody had a video camera on them at all times. Because,
I know. When you think about it, that's what it is. And a phone, and a camera.
I got a lot of catching up to do.
Yeah.
I've been taking a lot of pictures lately.
You need to take a picture of your wife's birth certificate so you can figure out what her middle name is.
Or hire a private investigator to find out where she came from.
Just give me her name. I'll figure it all out for you. I'll give you a printout.
It's a mail away braid. I'm telling you, that's what it is. Well, you're listening to the IRS Solution Attorney Show. We're having a little fun this morning, talking about some other stuff other than, just the IRS stuff. So we try to mix it up, keep you entertained on your drive to work or wherever you're going. We will zip through the rest of the other 5 through 9 when we come back after the break. I'm your co-host, Katrina Madewell, with the Darrin Mish for the IRS Solution Attorney Show. We'll be back in a minute. You're listening to the IRS Solution Attorney Show. I almost said Tampa Home Talk. Yeah, that'll be tomorrow at 9.
You had to get that shameless plug in there.
No,
for her
I
own
honestly
show.
did not mean to do that. It almost accidentally came out.
Okay, so the
have to
topic
zip
of the
through
show
5
was
more.
9 common tax mistakes, and we're only on number 4. So here's number 5: using the wrong IRS form. So I'll give you an example. You cannot use the form 1040 EZ unless all you have is wages, income with a W-2. If you have any other kind of income, interest, anything like that, then you cannot use a form 1040 EZ. If you use that form, it's going to get kicked back. You're going to have to do it again, and there may be penalties involved depending upon if you owe tax or not.
Makes sense. Is that the one you see frequently?
We see, it's not super frequent, but you do see people using the wrong form where they're trying to get a form to do what they want it to do, and that's not what it was designed to do.
Well, we talked about those online tools that people play with and kind of change stuff around.
Oh, yeah, when they use the tax software, they have a tendency to see that running total, and they want to go ahead and get the biggest refund possible, and that's not always the right thing to do, obviously.
Number 6 is claiming ineligible dependents.
Yeah, this is the My Baby's Mama, exception.
We talked about that.
And what it is when you have dependents, it's actually a race to see who gets their tax return filed first. So, in a lot of divorce cases, especially, right? There's a divorce, or there's a court order that says, okay, the mother gets to claim the kids, or
even or odd,
yeah,
or whatever,
those kinds of things. But the IRS is not privy to those, those court orders, and frankly, they don't care about the court orders. All they care about is who filed the return first.
So what does someone do if they have that scenario where they're supposed to be rotating or not claiming, but they are? Like, what kind of recourse do they have?
My understanding is the recourse is you go back to family court and you try to have the bad actor held in contempt by that judge because it's a violation of that judge's order. Now, is that real practical? Probably not. It's expensive to go to court. Family law attorneys charge a lot of money, and they charge hourly. And so, it can be really
but
expensive.
essentially, the IRS does not care. It's a race to the finish line.
They do not care. I have never been successful in cleaning that up.
Wow. And we heard that a lot. So number 7, failing to pay and report payroll taxes.
Yeah, this is really common where, you have a sole proprietor that's not a real sophisticated business guy, hires his first employee or employees, doesn't realize that there's a need to pay payroll tax or there's a need to file 941s and that kind of thing. Payroll taxes problems they spiral out of control fast. So that's probably the worst kind of problem.
Those are a lot of your clients, aren't they?
Yeah, and there's no way to discharge these types of taxes in bankruptcy either. So it's very, very serious.
Do they still settle them?
They do.
Okay.
They do.
All right, so number 8, I don't even know what this means, but it's forgetting about the alternative minimum tax. What is that?
So the alternative minimum tax, or AMT, is a special tax set up for people who are higher income earners, and it's designed to prevent them from being able to, for example, buy a gigantic house where they're paying all kinds of interest, and so they itemize, all that interest and they deduct it. The AMT kicks in at a certain point and nullifies those deductions to a certain extent, and you get to pay this alternative minimum tax. The Congress put that in place because at some point in the past, 20, 30 years ago, there was this big hue and cry about the rich are getting away with too much. And so they went ahead and they put that in. The problem is the limits haven't been adjusted for inflation over time in an appropriate fashion. And so lower and lower income people are starting to get hit by the AMT. It's really a bad thing.
And when does that apply exactly?
I can't tell you exactly because I don't have it right here, but
okay. We'll have to post that on at Darrin Mish on Twitter or your Facebook page.
Yeah, or you could visit the website and get IRShelp.com. We can talk about the AMT.
Number 9 is just straight up failing to file a return.
Yep, that's probably my single most common problem that I have in my practice is that people come in.
Or 20 years.
Is that they haven't filed a tax return in a while. My favorite is the gentleman who came in and had not filed a tax return since 1960. Well, that was before I was born, and I thought that was pretty darn cool. We got him caught up, and we did an offer and compromise for him, which is we made a deal with the IRS to settle for less. That was accepted. We put him on his way, and
they just want to get you back into the system.
That last little thing that I said was like a mini train wreck of the week, but this, in fact, is the IRS train wreck of the week segment. And in this segment, I talk about somebody who came into the office and they were kind of a train wreck and they left and it was all a happy ending, right?
All better. Fixed up.
So this is one of the very first offers and compromise that I did. It was back in the 90s, and I remember this very, very clearly. This gentleman called me from the Houston, Texas area, and he told me that he owed the IRS about $99,000. But he also told me, but Darrin, this is really old, and I understand that there's a statute of limitations, and that's 10 years, and it's 10 years from when the tax is assessed, and I think that statute of limitations is getting pretty close. So I went ahead and I looked into it, and it turns out there was only a month left on the statute of limitations. But this guy was really, really freaked out that he was going to get a levy in that last month. And despite what
They sending him letters?
they weren't really bugging him at all. He hadn't had any contact in a long time. But sometimes people just get into these circles, these loops where they get, they convince themselves. Yeah, they convince themselves that something bad's going to happen. This is real common when the statute's about to run out. So he insisted that we file an offer in compromise. Well, one of the bad things about an offer in compromise is it stops that time from running while the offer is pending. And most offers are pending for, 6 to 12 months, 18 months sometimes. The IRS has up to 2 years to rule upon that offer, or it's accepted. So if it just gets lost and 2 years and a day go by, it's deemed accepted. So he insisted he didn't want to get levied. And so he told me, hey, we got to file the offer. We filed the offer, and there was 1 month left on the statute of limitations.
You didn't try to talk him out of that, Darrin?
I did. I tried to talk him out of it, but he insisted. And so we went ahead and offered $1,000, and the IRS called me really pretty quickly. I want to say it was like, I don't know, 3 or 4 months. And we had kind of an open discussion about the statute was super short, and that the case was probably going to just go ahead and expire. And they were kind of almost talking me into, just dropping the offer and then letting it go. The problem is the offer adds 6 months, time in the offer plus 6 months. Or is it 60 days? It doesn't really matter. It adds some time on the end. And so it would have, in effect, lengthened the statute. Long story short, IRS took $1,000 in that case. So $1,000 on $99,000 was my very first really big win. And client was amazingly happy.
The other thing you chatted about during the break, just real quick, that we were talking about the percentage of people that actually get audited, and it's less than 1%.
Yeah, I think the last stat that came out was 0.84% of individual taxpayers are actually audited or were audited in the 2015 fiscal year. It goes up if you make more money. There was another interesting stat, and that was if you make over $1 million a year, your odds of being audited are 12.5%. So this big dust up on Trump not releasing his tax returns.
Yeah.
It turns out he's under audit, which is not unusual. The guy's a billionaire. He's probably been through 1 million of them. But if I was representing him, I'd say, I don't know if we want to release these tax returns right now while you're on.
And in the political dirt, they're slinging mud. Anyway, You're listening to the IRS Solution Attorney Show with Mr. Darrin Mish. You can reach him off air at 888-GET-MISH, which is probably most of your clients. 888-GET-MISH, M-I-S-H.
Or getirshelp.com.
Thanks for joining us. For this week, we're out.